What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Talking Sports with Jake. We're talking about some fantasy football today. Sorry for the long layoff. Moving into my dorm and the first week of classes getting started, I took a little time off, a little bit more than I wanted to. I was trying to get reacclimated to school again after a long break, but we are back. Hope you're all doing well. I'm hoping we can do this podcast at least 3 times a week going forward. Expect us to be back here probably tomorrow once again, but we're doing a fantasy football preview right now. For those of my friends that are on Colorcast, of course, the app that I'm on right now, doing this podcast, Colorcast, we got our own draft tonight. We already got some draft pick trading going on since it's on Sleeper, so the Dynasty League, so we got draft pick trading going on. I've already made some moves. Got some other people that have made some moves. The league chairman, call him Armchair, he's loses his mind over all these trades, but should be a lot of fun. I'm going to talk about some fantasy football today. I'm going to go over strategies, how you draft a good team, certain strategies you should employ, certain things you should do, certain things you should not do. I'll go over the rankings for each position, give you some players that I like this year, some guys that I don't like, guys might be a little overrated in fantasy this year, guys might, could regress, guys that might break out, guys that could be sleepers, could come out of nowhere just by having a low ADP. Should be a lot of fun. So let's jump right in. So let's start off with just fantasy football strategies. Early on in the draft, you should really try to stack up on your running backs and wide receivers, okay? You're taking quarterback early. If Josh Allen is there in the third or the fourth round, you want to take him. I personally think that's fine. There are some guys out there will say, don't even, use a first round pick even on Josh Allen in the third or the fourth round. I do think, because Josh Allen, he's been the number one quarterback in fantasy football for like 2 years in a row now. He's a guy who's got so many weapons, and he's going to throw for a lot of yards, and he can run a lot. He'll get a lot of touchdowns because of how good he is and just how many yards and touchdowns he racks up. He's, a fantasy football monster. He's a guy who's never coming out of your lineup unless he's on bye. Or God forbid he were get injured, but he never gets injured, so you don't have to worry about that. So I think it's fine if you take him. Maybe if Patrick Mahomes were to be there in maybe the fifth round or something, and you still think Mahomes could be a top fantasy football quarterback despite losing Tyreek Hill. If that's the way you feel, fine. But running backs and receivers are so important because, they can really rack up a lot of points. And there's so many good ones, especially if you're in a deep league. If you don't have great backs and receivers, it's going to be tough to rack up points. Because outside of them, you got, all right, your quarterback, you better have a really good quarterback. Even if you have an average one that can still get you 18 or 19 points, which is still very good. If your backs and receivers aren't putting up points, after that, it's just, you better hope that your flex goes off, which, can be hard to do. A lot of times you play for the matchup. Your tight ends, unless you have a top 3 or 4 one, may not get you more than maybe 10 points. And obviously your kicker and defense, you're lucky if you get 10 points out of those guys. I mean, there can times they get, a lot more than that, but a lot of times, 10 points is a good score for your kicker and for your defense. So if you don't get backs and receivers, you're kind of screwed. So I would say the first 4 rounds, try to focus on your running backs and your wide receivers. If a top tight end like Travis Kelce, like Mark Andrews, George Kittle, one of those guys, is available in the third or the fourth round, if he's there for you, and you like the makeup of your team so far, you think you can get another back or receiver in the fourth or the fifth round, then I do believe it is okay to take a top tight end in the first 4 rounds. But there's no reason to reach for a guy like Darren Waller. Let's say he comes around the fifth or the sixth round, when you better have taking a chance and waiting for him and taking a really good backer receiver, in the third or the fourth round instead. And tight end, you can still get a decent tight end, in the slightly later rounds. So definitely stock on backs and receivers your first 4 picks if you can. Tight end, I would say fifth round's a good spot to take one. Having a good tight end is definitely, I would say, is an advantage. Look for a pass catching tight end. There's a bunch of good ones, especially this year. Can wait on tight ends. If you don't get, I would say one of the top 3 or 4. If you don't get Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens, or George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. You're probably better off waiting a little bit. Darren Waller from Las Vegas Raiders is also a great player. You can probably get him in the 5th or the 6th round, depending on how deep your league is. But if you don't get one of those first 3 or 4 guys, you're better off waiting because you can get in the later rounds, 7th, 8th round. There's still a good chance you can get someone like Dalton Schultz from the Dallas Cowboys, who's really good. T.J. Hockenson from the Detroit Lions, who's really good. And there's so many other ones too. You never know. A guy like Pat Freiermuth from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's going really late, could be a guy who could possibly, I think, be top 10 at his position this year in fantasy football. So if you can get a top 3 or 4 10 in fantasy football, earlier on in the draft, don't be afraid. But if you don't get one, don't panic. In the slightly later round, you can still get a very good tight end. Zach Ertz is another one. Dallas Goedert in Philly. Zach Ertz is now in Arizona. So many good tight ends that you can get, even a little later in the draft. As for quarterback, I would wait. Like I said, if Josh Allen's there in the 3rd or the 4th round, if you want to take him, if you're confident to make up your team, fine, because Josh Allen's probably the one exception. Sometimes for quarterbacks, there's an exception to the rule to wait on a guy. Like when Patrick Mahomes came off his 50 touchdown year, he still had Tyreek Hill. All right, yeah, if he was there early on, then yeah, you take him. Other years, there's not an exception. Usually there isn't, but this year I would say Josh Allen because he just gets so many points. Like I said, he throws for so many yards. He's good for at least 4,500 passing yards. He's going to run for probably 500 more. He's good for at least 35 total touchdowns. He's probably going to have at least 4 or 5 on the ground. He's not going to turn the ball over too much. He's got so many weapons. He's definitely a stud in fantasy football, but like Derek Carr's the guy who last year was decent, and now he adds a top receiver in the game, Davante Adams. Now we've got Davante Adams. Hunter Renfrow is a great player, a guy who had over 1,000 yards and 9 scores last year. And you have Darren Waller, who you'll have healthy. He's a top 5 tight end in the league, probably top 5 in football and fantasy football as well. He's all of a sudden primed for a big year. Like he's a guy that you can get pretty late in the draft. So you can definitely wait on him. So what I'm saying is you can get a really good solid quarterback, like probably in even the 8th or 9th round. I like taking my quarterback probably like 6th, 7th round. But if you're heading into the 8th round without a quarterback, do not panic. There's still a bunch of really good solid quarterbacks you can get in the later rounds. Derek Carr, you'd probably get more team probably around 6 and 8, and he's a guy who could be top 5 in fantasy football for quarterbacks just because of how many pieces he has on that offense now. So quarterbacks you can definitely wait on. If you're able to get one earlier, if Josh Allen's there, like I said, feel free. But 7th, 8th round, you still don't have one, it's completely fine. Moving on to your bench. For bench players, you swing for the fences. Okay, swing for the fences when it comes to your bench guys. Take guys who have high upside. They're coming off the bench. As of right now, they're only going to be getting into the game. Into your lineup. If someone either gets hurt or they're on bye, which I'm sure will happen, injuries are going to happen. Where it's a guy who misses the whole season or misses one game, it'll happen. Obviously, every team has a bye week, so probably every player on your team will probably have to miss at least one game because he's going to go on bye. So you got to make sure you have some good bench spots, but definitely swing for the fences. I've been doing some 14-team mock drafts. A 14-team league, and Tyler Lockett is still, I think, going like the 7th or the 8th or the 9th round. Obviously, he's got a quarterback issue. His quarterback is Geno Smith, who's terrible, but Tyler Lockett seems every year to be a at least a top 20 receiver in fantasy football. If he's there in the 8th round, you might as well take him. If he goes out and doesn't have a great year just because Geno Smith can't get him the ball, all right, whatever. He's coming off your bench. We never know. Maybe Tyler Lockett, who's always been considered a guy who's one of the more underrated receivers in the game. Maybe he's even more underrated than we thought. He's still able to be a top 10 receiver even with a bad quarterback. You could get a guy who could be your wide receiver 2 for the whole year in let's say the 8th round. So bench, you should try to do some high upside. At that point, there's not too much risk. Obviously, if you miss on your first round pick, that could really ruin your season, because that's the guy who's supposed to be a guy who get you 20 points plus every week. Only comes out of lineup when he's on bye. But for you miss on your 8th round pick, that's fine. You can just put the guy on waivers and replace him with someone who a better player for your team on waivers. So coming it to your bench, not really a lot of risk involved. So swing for the fences. Make sure you have good depth, so when your guys are on bye and they get hurt, you have guys that can replace them. For kicker and defense, okay, it drives me nuts when it's the 8th round and I see the Buffalo Bills defense being picked. Your kicker and your defense should be your last 2 picks in the draft. There was no reason to use an 8th or a 9th round pick when you can get a guy like Tyler Lockett, who could be a really good player for you, and so you take a defense or a kicker. For kickers, just take a kicker who's pretty good and is in a good offense. If they're in a good offense, they're going to score what? Obviously, he's going to be kicking all the extra points and the field goals. So they're in a good offense. That's a big plus. Like I believe Dustin Hopkins is the Chargers kicker. Dustin Hopkins isn't, he's no Justin Tucker, but the Chargers offense is really, really good, and he's solid. So he's a guy I would definitely pick up. I would rather a guy with a mediocre kicker, so for what he's done in his career so far, in an elite offense than a guy who's might be one of the league's best kickers, but he's in a bad offense. If the team can't get even into field goal range for the kicker, he's not gonna get any points. That's why I like Greg Zuerlein, who although is a very good kicker, was with the Rams all those years, was with Dallas, I think, most recently. Now he's on the Jets. I love the Jets, and I do think Greg Zuerlein's very good. I'm happy the Jets signed him. I think he's an upgrade of what they had a kicker last year. But in fantasy, I'm not interested in him because although he's a very good kicker, the Jets offense, although, we don't know if it'll be any better this year now if, Zach Wilson going into year 2 and stuff, in recent years, their offense has been so bad, you want to risk their offense doing that again, and Zuerlein just, not being able to get any points. Like I said, a guy like Dustin Hopkins, who's a more mediocre kicker, he's not going to, I wouldn't trust him to make a 55-yarder with the game on the line, but he's a solid kicker. Not only is he solid, he's also in an offense that might be putting up 30 points every game in the Chargers, because they got arguably a top 5 offense in the game. So for kickers, just get a guy who's pretty good and in a good offense, and wait till your last 2 picks. And for defense, honestly, kicker and defense, you're better off just streaming. I usually stream mine. If you're able to get Justin Tucker later, and he ends up being a kicker for the whole year, fine. If you're able to pick up a defense that ends up having a great year, and you're going to keep him for the whole year, fantastic. Good for you. But I've won leagues while streaming my kicker and defense. I've had years where I've had a different kicker and a different defense every single week. And I still had a successful season. Wait until your last 2 picks. Usually the number 1 defense from the year before doesn't finish as number 1 defense, the year afterwards. When the Jacksonville Jaguars had Saxonville, the year afterwards, they were the number 1 defense. They were the first defense off the board. Sometimes they're going in like the 7th round, which was crazy. And then they didn't do nearly as well. And to anyone who spent, a 6th or 7th round pick on the Jaguars defense a year probably was kicking themselves. They definitely were. They should have been. When the Chicago Bears won the NFC North a few years back, they had that top-rated defense. The year afterwards, they were the first defense all off the board pretty much in every draft, and the defense didn't do nearly as well. So whoever spent a pick on them a lot earlier than they would have normally picked up a defense, I'm sure was very upset with that. And like this year, I think the number one fantasy football defense is the Buffalo Bills. I think they're arguably a top 5, at least top 7 defense in the NFL. They're a very good defense. There's been better number one defense in fantasy football throughout the years. So defense and kicker, your last 2 picks, you might as well just stream them. If you can get a really good kicker and he lasts you fine, if you get lucky with a draw with a defense in the draft, great. But you're better off just streaming. Just get, for defenses, just honestly, what I do with my defense, I say that for my last pick, I'll take either one that's, if I happen to know what their matchup is, the matchup for the defenses, I'll just look for one who has a good matchup for week 1. If not, I'll just pick a defense that's pretty solid, and then once the year starts, once week 1 starts creeping up, if I see they have a good matchup, I'll keep them, but if not, I might just swap them. For defense should be your last 2 draft picks. So those are my strategies for fantasy football. Make sure you play. It's a lot of fun. A lot of these leagues are free. Obviously, there are paid leagues. If you're in a paid league, that's different. That's your choice. But there's so many apps where they're free. ESPN, NFL.com, Yahoo Sports. If you're into that Dynasty League, which is a little more complex, you draft on Sleeper. That's what our ColorCast draft is drafting on, Sleeper. And the number one rule is have fun. Supposed to be fun, not supposed to be life or death. That's why I don't like paid leagues. I don't do paid leagues anymore. I don't do the daily fantasy anymore. I've done paid leagues in the past. Starting this year, I completely cut that off. I'm done with those. I would stick to free leagues, but if y'all want to do paid leagues, that's on you. But just have some fun with it, okay? Have some fun. All right, now into the actual players. So we're going to look at the positional rankings for ESPN fantasy football. I'm going up ESPN. ESPN fantasy football is by far the most common fantasy football site. So we're going to take a look at that. Take a look at the rankings, and I'm going to see some guys that I think are ranked too high, maybe ranked too low. First, let's check out the quarterbacks. So, Josh Allen is definitely number 1, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. He's definitely number 1. The guy's a top 5 quarterback in the game. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's good for 4,500 passing yards. He runs a lot. Quarterbacks that can run are really, really valuable. Like, for example, Jalen Hurts, you could argue, did not have a good year in the NFL last year. He only threw for 3,100 yards, only had 16 touchdowns. You could argue it was really, the run game, the defense, that was more so the reason the Eagles were in the playoffs than Jalen Hurts' play last year. Because he ran so much. He ran for almost 800 yards and 10 touchdowns. He racked up so many points. He right now, heading into this year, is ranked as the 6th best quarterback in fantasy football. Although, in the NFL, he might, he's a top 20 starter in the league in fantasy football. He's definitely a top 10 guy. So if you have a quarterback that can run, they have a big advantage, which is why if Lamar Jackson is healthy, I think he's a great option. ESPN has him ranked at number 4. Yeah, and I think that's very fair because Lamar's a guy who literally might run for 1,000 yards. Things with quarterbacks, like obviously with running backs, receivers, and tight ends, if they get 10 yards, that they get a point. But quarterbacks need 25 yards to get a point. But for rushing, it's the same thing as, running backs. They get 10 yards, they get a point. Obviously, quarterbacks don't run the area as much, but most of them, but those that do. So if you have a quarterback that runs for 50 yards, 50 passing yards would only be 2 points, but 50 rushing yards for a quarterback is 5 points. So quarterbacks that can run have a big, big advantage. So just get a quarterback. I would recommend one that has some good weapons, which is why, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, although he is probably a top 3 quarterback in the game, he's a 2-time defending MVP. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. This year in fantasy may not be the best option. ESPN has him ranked at 11th. He said that seems awfully low for a guy who's a 2-time defending MVP. And I'm not even sure he has 10 interceptions over the last 3 years combined. Because, that being said, he loses Davante Adams. He doesn't really have very good weapons. Not saying he's going to struggle and the Packers aren't going to win their division. I think it's very possible, very, very possible. Aaron Rodgers still has a great year, and the Packers still win the NFC North and are still a very good team this year. But for fantasy football, Rodgers may not be the best option because he doesn't have that many weapons. They might run the ball a little bit more. Rodgers doesn't really run the ball that much, so he's more of a pocket passer. So with him losing Davante Adams, that really hurts his fantasy value for sure. I mentioned it earlier. I think Derek Carr is a guy who could be a steal. ESPN has him ranked as the 14th best quarterback in fantasy football. He's quarterback 14. He's a guy who's always been, I would say average. No in the NFL, but in fantasy football. You look at the weapons he had. He brings in Davante Adams, who's a top 3 receiver in the game, an absolute stud. You have Hunter Renfrow, who's really good. Renfrow was their top receiver last year. This was a team that, of all the issues they had last year, Darren Waller missed like 5 games last year. Renfrow was really the only wide receiver they can count on after Henry Ruggs was let go after his obvious off-the-field issues. And he still had over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. And he was, I would have to think, was double covered a lot last year because for even when Darren Waller was healthy, it was really just those 2 guys. And Darren Waller missed like 5 or 6 games last year. So there were like 5 or 6 weeks where Hunter Renfrow was literally the only weapon Carr had. Now you got Davante, who's a beast. Hunter Renfrow's really good. You have a healthy Darren Waller. He's got so many weapons. He's a good player. He's a guy who could possibly be a top 5 guy in fantasy football this year. And he's only ranked quarterback number 14. You got, like I said, make sure your quarterbacks have some good weapons, which is why, I'll play Josh Allen, but Justin Herbert's a guy who's ranked as number quarterback 3. He's a great quarterback, and he's got a lot of weapons. Russell Wilson's a guy who's got a lot of weapons, which is why he's quarterback number 7. Tom Brady, he's 45, but obviously still a great quarterback. And he's got a lot of weapons, which is why he's quarterback 8. Looking at the rankings, you have, Lamar, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts. Those are all guys who a lot of times rely on Merlez. Kyler Murray, we know, can throw a deep ball. But I still do think Kyler Murray will have success in fantasy football this year. Even without DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 weeks, he'll be there by week 7. Even without him, he runs a lot. He can make a lot of plays with his legs. Now he's got a really good pass catching back in James Conner. Marquise Brown is a guy who's a really good deep threat, and Kyler Murray loves to throw up a deep ball. That's a pass first offense out there in Arizona. And you got Rondale Moore, who played pretty well last year. He's had a strong camp. AJ Green's still a pretty good player. Zach Ertz is a good tight end. The chemistry between Kyler and Ertz got better and better. Was really good throughout last year after they made the trade for him. He's got a lot of good weapons, and he can make a lot of plays with his leg. I still think he's a great option to have in fantasy football. I think Jalen Hurts is a pretty good option because he runs so much. And now that he has A.J. Brown, who's one of the top receivers in the game, he's a guy you could use. He can be a deep threat. He can go over the middle. You could do kind of use like how Deebo Samuel was last year. He's the kind of guy you could do some trick plays with. Now Devonta Smith with another year under his belt. Obviously he's got chemistry with Jalen Hurts going back to when they were at Alabama together before Jalen Hurts switched to Oklahoma and early on Devonta Smith's career at Alabama. And he's going to have one-on-one coverage all day because they got to focus all their attention on A.J. Brown now. Dallas Goedert's a great tight end. They got some backs who can catch the ball. So I think Jalen Hurts could be a guy who I think as a passer, we know what he can do as a runner. But as a passer, I think he can take a step forward just having A.J. Brown there. Of course, with Goddard, I think Devonta Smith will be even better this year. There's a couple guys I'm not huge fans of. He's obviously a great player, but I don't really think Aaron Rodgers is a smart pick this year. He doesn't have a lot of good weapons. I know his running backs could catch the ball. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones can catch. Is a very good pass catcher, especially. Look at his receivers. Allen Lazard is very unproven. He has a few good games every year, but he has shown no reason to why we should trust him to be a number one wide receiver. Christian Watson is a second round rookie who I do think has some potential, but I don't see him completely jumping up the page in his first year. Quaymon St. Brown is really a depth player. Having Robert Tonyan healthy will help. He's a good player, very good in the red zone. He's a guy who's going to be at best probably the 8th or 9th tight end. He's good, but I wouldn't say he blows anybody out of the water. So I still think he has great weapons. I think they might run the ball a little bit more, especially having a healthier offensive line with Becketeer, your left tackle, and having Elton Jenkins healthy. I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't getting any younger. He's going to be, 38, 37 years old. Losing Devontae, not having, a great set of weapons. So I just don't like the weapons that he has around him. I just don't think he's a great player this year for fantasy football. Another guy I'm not a fan of, I'm not going to lie, I don't love Dak Prescott this year. Okay, obviously fantasy football is different than football. Obviously, Jalen Hurts, as of right now, is not a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. On fantasy, like I said, because of his running ability, is ranked. But the ESPN has him ranked at 6. I think that's very fair. Dak, I've been on the record saying Dak's very overrated as a football player. In fantasy, in past years, he's been a guy who I think has been a really good pick because they've had so many good weapons. Having Amari Cooper, who's already a top 10 receiver in the game, CeeDee Lamb's emerging as that. Having Michael Gallup, who's a good player, having a couple of good tight ends, having running backs that can catch the ball. He's a guy. I don't think a lot of his success has been because of the weapons he's had around him. And now you lose Amari Cooper, who's a great player, a top 15 receiver at least in the NFL. You lose Cedric Wilson, who was a good speed threat you had. Michael Gallup, not going to be on the pup list, but will probably be out week 1. We'll see if he's back by week 2. We'll miss the very start of the year. Although we still have CeeDee Lamb as a great receiver, I think could have a huge year. Dalton Schultz is a good tight end. Tony Pollard catches a lot of passes. They lost a lot of receivers this year. Ezekiel Elliott is past his prime. He's not the pass catcher that he once was. I still think his weapons are very strong this year, though. I think he could be maybe an average option. There's a lot of guys that are behind him I like better. I like Joe Burrow better than him this year because his weapons are so good. And Burrow already is a great player, and he's still only in his third year in the league, so he's only going to get better. And I think Stafford still has great weapons. He's ranked number 13. I think he can be better than Dak Prescott this year. And that's 2 right there. Derek Carr's another one. Even Kirk Cousins, because they're going to throw the ball more and got so many weapons. That's 4 guys right there that, off the top of my head, I think are going to be ranked higher than Dak Prescott in fantasy football. So those are my thoughts on the quarterbacks. That's for the young guys. Your Tua, your Trevor Lawrences, the guys who were drafted last year. I don't know about those guys. A lot of these guys I think have potential. But I think Trevor Lawrence will be a great quarterback. I'm hoping so. As a Jeff fan, I do believe Zach Wilson will be a great quarterback in one day. Could there be deep sleepers? I think Trevor Lawrence possibly, because although they don't have true number one receiver, the weapons are a lot better. He has an actual, head coach this year, so it should be. I think he'll be a lot better, but still not proven number one. He still isn't proven, so probably going with a proven option. But keep an eye on some of these young guys. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be an amazing quarterback. I have confidence in Zach Wilson with the Jets. I think Mac Jones has a chance to be a really, really good quarterback. Justin Fields, I do think will eventually be a great quarterback. The problem is the Bears are saying to fail, so he's not a good option. Keep an eye on the young guys. I would not draft them right away, but keep your eye on them. There's nothing wrong with it. I personally don't see anything wrong with stacking Trevor Lawrence on your bench in the 14th round as quarterback 17. But keep an eye on those young guys. I wouldn't draft, like I said, don't draft them. Don't draft them right away. But keep running throughout the year. Maybe stash one on your bench. If he ends up, taking a big step forward, could be a big trade piece for you. So keep an eye on him. Let's go to the running backs. The running backs are of utmost importance. A lot of really good ones. As for running backs, my advice would be if they can catch the ball, that's a huge advantage in PPR, which is point per reception. Most leagues are PPR 1 point PPR. I've been in leagues where it's half point PPR. I've been in leagues where it's no point when there's no PPR. I don't think there's no point per reception. Then it doesn't really matter if it's half point. If it's half PPR, then guys who your guys like Alvin Kamara who are going to be might be your team's leading receiver. Those guys still have a lot of value, but if they only catch the ball sometimes, not so much. But in 1 point PPR, which is what most leagues are, then pass catching running backs are gold. And a lot of these running backs do catch the ball a lot now. Like on my screen, the top 13 are Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb. There's only two guys on this list who don't catch a lot of passes. That's Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, and obviously Derrick Henry is a guy who, if he's healthy, could run for 2,000 yards. So when you run for 2,000 yards and 15 touchdowns, that's obviously fine. And Nick Chubb might be the best pure runner in the league outside Derrick Henry. And honestly, he can catch the ball. He did it at Georgia, and earlier in his career, I do believe he was a decent pass catcher. Just that Cleveland happens to have Kareem Hunt there, who specializes as a pass catching back, so they just don't need to throw to him to catch the ball. But always got great options. But obviously, there's one that has a big asterisk, and that is Christian McCaffrey. He has played just 10 games over the last 2 years. He's ranked as the number 2 overall running back. In the live draft, he's ranked as the number 2 overall player. So if you have a top pick and he's there, of course you're questioning, do I take him or do I not? This one's tough because he's a guy, if he's healthy, he's probably the best player in all of fantasy football. Last year, he only played like 6 games or something like that, and I think his worst game, he still had 21 points, which is still elite production. He's a guy who's good for over 20 points every single week. Because obviously he's going to give you probably over 100 yards on the ground, and he's probably a better receiver than maybe half the wide receivers in the league, and he's a running back. So to take him or not to take him. Okay, if you do take him, first of all, you have to have his handcuff. Make sure you get Chuba Hubbard, who was serviceable as a starting in place of him last year. You must get his handcuff if you are going to draft him. Chuba Hubbard, the guy you can get him in the late rounds. Make sure you grab him. Being said, if you have the second pick, Personally, I would probably rather Derrick Henry over him. Fantasy football wise, in real NFL, I would say he's probably top three, and when healthy, is number one. Fantasy football wise, Jonathan Taylor should definitely be number one pick in pretty much every draft. The guy's a monster. They're still going to run the ball. I know. Kind of was saying you might lighten his workload a little bit, but like his workload was so heavy. Saying you can lighten it a little bit still is going to give him one of the heaviest workloads in the league. I'm not worried about that at all. And he catches a lot of passes too. He's also a great pass catcher. He's an absolute stud. No reason he should not be number one pick. I do like Derrick Henry more than him. I know Derrick Henry was hurt last year, and obviously he's had such heavy workloads the last 2 years. Kind of his age for a running back, but I think he's never had injury issues at all. Like I understand the heavy workload. His last year at Alabama, he had a really heavy workload. The last few years, he's had a historic amount of carries. And, especially with them losing A.J. Brown and Julio Jones in their receiver room, could they possibly have even heavier workload? Speaking of Titans running back, shout out to Julius Chestnut. He's one of the Titans running backs. He played football at my school, Sacred Heart University. Sacred Heart University plays in the NEC, which is a very, very low-level conference, so we never have, very, very rare, we have any of even our top Division I sports guys go pro, and he wasn't signed as an undrafted free agent by the Tennessee Titans, and he made the team. And another shout-out to Josh Schokel, who was an offensive lineman. He made the Vikings practice squad, so shout-out to those two guys. Back to our schedule programming. I would like Derrick Henry over McCaffrey. I know he got hurt last year, but it's the only year he's been injured. I know about the heavy workload, even dating back to his college days and his age. But I'm confident he can stay healthy again. And I would even take Austin Ekeler over McCaffrey because Ekeler is going to catch so many passes, and he's probably going to rack up a lot of rushing yards. ESPN has him ranking the third best running back in fantasy football. He could easily be a top 5 pick in fantasy this year. I would probably take him over McCaffrey. Even Dalvin Cook, I might take over him. But I think, I don't agree with him being the number 2 ranked guy, but I still think he's a top 5 running back in fantasy football. I would probably put Jonathan Taylor over him. I would probably put Austin Ekeler over him, even Derrick Henry. I still think Dalvin Cook is a top option. I know people are saying he could regress because they're going to pass the ball more. But he's still going to run for well over 1,000 yards, and he's a guy who's a great pass catcher. They're still going to use him a lot, and he's going to be used a lot in the passing game still. And so could he have a tiny, tiny drop off? Yeah, but he'll still be, I would say, at least a top 7 back in fantasy football, I would say. So if you have a second pick, and you can get, I would probably take Jonathan Taylor, Austin Ekeler, or Derrick Henry over him. Even if you have the third pick, if Derrick Henry or Austin Ekeler is there, Jonathan Taylor, I'm sure will go number 1. If Taylor, Ekeler, or Henry is still there at number 3, along with McCaffrey, I'm probably taking Ekeler, Henry, or Taylor. If you have the 4th pick and McCaffrey's the top player on the board, even if you can get Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, I do think it's appropriate to draft Christian McCaffrey at the 4th or the 5th pick, even with guys who could be top 5, at least top 5 guys at their position. Oh yeah, because although he's played just 10 games over the last 2 years, meaning he's got 23 missed. He's missed the majority of the last 2 years because of how heavy his workloads have been with Carolina. But if he's healthy, he's probably the best player in fantasy football. So I wouldn't take him at 2, but if he's still there, I think he should be in the top 5. So I would say 4 or 5th pick get him. But if you have a 2nd or 3rd pick, I would lean towards Austin Ekeler or Derrick Henry. And Jonathan Taylor should be number 1 pick of the draft in every draft. I want to talk about Aaron Jones. He's ranked as running back number 12, so he's probably gonna be a second or third round pick. I think he could be a really good player this year. I know they got AJ Dillon there. I really like him. They used AJ Dillon a lot last year, so he could lose some carries. But because of the Packers' lack of weapons, I think they could run the ball a little bit more this year. So I do think Jones will still get a decent amount of carries. I think he'll still get some. I think he'll still be at least some carries in the red zone. Because of their lack of weapons, Aaron Jones, who's always been a great pass catcher, even with missing a few games last year, still had put up some really solid receiving numbers. Could see an uptick in the even larger uptick in the receiving game. Assuming he'll be healthy this year, just not having a group of receivers around Aaron Rodgers might look, to Aaron Jones a little bit more in the receiving game this year. So I think Jones, who's ranked running back number 12, could be inside the top 7 this year. It's because I think the Packers are going to run the ball more, and I think Rodgers might look to Jones a little bit more in the passing game because he just doesn't quite trust the other unproven receivers that he has this year with no Devontae Adams there. Looking at the list, one guy I would stay away from is Saquon Barkley. ESPN has him ranked at running back number 15, and I think he's a very good player. But the dude cannot stay healthy. And I know I just went out and said that Christian McCaffrey you should still take him at the 4th or the 5th pick despite his injuries. He's probably even more injury prone than Barkley. But even when Saquon Barkley's been on the field his last 2 years, he has not been the same player. Like McCaffrey, yes, he's never on the field, but when he is, he's probably the best player in fantasy football. Saquon Barkley, he's a guy who always misses games. These last couple of years, he's missed a lot of time. These last 3 years, he's missed a bunch of games. He had the 1 year where I think his second year he missed most of the year, and then last year he's missed like probably 2, 3, 4 games each. I know he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. And obviously, in his rookie year, he was a monster. But when he's been on the field, he hasn't been the same. So, like I said, McCaffrey, although he's always injured, when he's on the field, probably the best player in fantasy. Saquon Barkley, not only is he injured quite a bit, even when he's on the field, he's good but not great. So he's ranked, the 15th best running back. If you're getting him in like the 3rd round, I think there's a lot of better options than Saquon Barkley at his ADP. I think his ADP is a little high for the production that you're going to get out of him. The O-line there is a little bit better. Could Daniel Jones look for him, in the flat to try to avoid throwing, a ton of interceptions? Because for him, it's make or break this year. His 4th year in the league. They got him a new coach. O-line's a bit better. Maybe, but he's, along with his injuries, he just hasn't been the same player since his rookie year, even when he's been on the field the last couple of years. So I would lean away from him. Looking at some of these other guys, bunch of running backs you might be looking at, like, I'm not sure. Outside of once you get past the first wave of backs, we know are pretty much all sure things. James Conner, running back 14. I think you should be comfortable drafting James Conner. Yes, he had 15 touchdowns 15 rushing touchdowns. I think 18 total. And guys who have more than more than 15 touchdowns, a lot of times they see some regression. Cause it's just so hard to have 15 plus touchdowns year in and year out. That's basically unheard of. But even if he doesn't have 15 touchdowns, I do think he'll still have at least 10 because that's a pass-happy offense in Arizona, and James Conner is a great pass catcher. Chase Edmonds, who caught a lot of balls out of the backfield for Arizona last year at the running back position, is no longer there. He signed with the Miami Dolphins in the offseason. So, and with DeAndre Hopkins out of the first 6 weeks, I think James Conner, who already caught a lot of passes last year, could catch even more passes this year. He's now going to get even more carries with Chase Edmonds not there. I still think he'll get a lot of touches in the red zone. You're down by the goal line. I think that it's going to be him. So, will we have 15 rushing touchdowns and 18 total touchdowns? Maybe not that number, but I could see 10 to 12 rushing touchdowns and 13 to 14 total touchdowns again, and the yards will be there. So I think James Conner is a very good player. He's a perfect fit for that offense in Arizona. you should definitely feel comfortable drafting him. There's two guys here who I think I'm fine with drafting, but maybe not quite at their ADPs. Cam Akers. Yeah, I like Cam Akers. His rookie year in a committee, and he completely took over. Last year, it was good on him for coming back. Torn Achilles usually costs the entire season coming back before the regular season was over. And taking over the lead backer on that committee. I know Sonny Michel is not there anymore, but Darrell Henson is still there. And Sean McVay said still gonna be running back by committee. He's ever since Todd Gurley called him, he basically fell off the face of the earth. That's how McVay has worked his backfields. So I'm still not sure he's gonna get the lion's share of the carry. I think he still will. I think at least at first he'll be split. If Darrell Henson, and that's still only a pass out the outlets. You got a pocket passer with Matt Stafford with Cooper Kupp obviously there. And now you got Allen Robinson. You have Tyler Higbee, tight end. You never know. Odell Beckham Jr. could get signed back at some point, even if it's, even if it's not for another month or something. I think that if he does sign with someone this year, Odell Beckham Jr., of course, recovering from that knee injury, might be out until midseason at least. I could see him going somewhere else. Maybe that's not being talked about, but I think still the Rams are still the favorite. The relationship that he formed with Matthew Stafford, the relationship that he formed with Sean McVay, and just he was able to just reboot his career with the Rams after a couple of tough years with the Giants. I don't think they're going to run the ball as much, and he's going to be split with Darrell Henderson. So, not sure I'll take him as ADP. Ezekiel Elliott's another guy. I know he's a guy who's still, even though he's a little older and he was nicked up throughout the year. You think he played through some injuries last year. Still had 1,000 yards. And with losing weapons, they could run the ball. They could run the ball some more. But I think after seeing what Tony Pollard can do, although I do think Zeke will be the starter the entire year, and Tony Pollard, I think, will cut into his workload even more. I don't think Zeke is going to catch too many passes this year. He just can't catch passes the way that he used to, and they have Tony Pollard to do that. I think Tony Pollard's more explosive at this point in those two guys' career. I think he'll cut into his workload on the ground even more this year. So I would stay away from Zeke. I think he'll have the guy who was good, not great last year, and will have some regression. A bunch of guys in the middle who are a little unproven. Travis Etienne, I think, is a good pick. If you got chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, I think he'll catch some passes. Breece Hall's an interesting one. I love the Jets. I like Breece Hall a lot. I do think his ADP is a touch high because it's still not confirmed that he's even going to start over Michael Carter at first. There might be split at first. They might go with the hot hand. So I would try to get him at a little bit lower of an ADP. A guy that I like is J.K. Dobbins, the guy that I really like. Obviously he got the injury problem, but I think he'll be healthy once he's there. I know he might miss the first game or two, but once he's there, because of how much the Ravens run the ball, obviously Lamar Jackson will run a ton. But as for the running backs, J.K. Dobbins is definitely the lead back, especially with Gus Edwards out at least the first 4 weeks of the season. Even with Gus Edwards going to be there by, possibly being there by week 5. And then signing Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake is going to be a pass-catching back. I don't think he's going to get that many carries. Mike Davis is really more of a pass-catching back. Not really a great runner. So I still think we'll get the lion's share of the carries and maybe the most run-heavy offense in the league. So I think he's a real good option. Real good option this year. A guy that could be a deep sleeper that no one's talking about is Dameon Pierce, running back for the Houston Texans. He's a 4th-round rookie, had a really good camp, looked good in preseason. Texans really like this kid. They had a couple of other backs there. They had Marlon Mack, who last time he was fully healthy and was the starter. Indianapolis had over 1,000 yards. Obviously, last year, being the backup of Jonathan Taylor, couldn't get a lot of reps, and the year before was injured. But they cut him, so it appears that they are going to make Dameon Pierce the star. They haven't, there's been rumors that he's going to start. David Culley hasn't officially committed to him, but it looks like that he is going to be the starter. And their passing offense is up, nothing special. Brandon Cooks is a very good receiver who I think is underrated, but Davis Mills is a very unproven quarterback. Outside of Brandon Cooks, there's really no other weapons there that are a threat at all in Houston. So I think Dameon Pierce could be a guy who could get a pretty heavy workload, and could be a guy if the Texans are right about him, could be a guy that kind of comes out of nowhere this year. Well, I'll talk about Antonio Gibson for the Washington Commanders. A few weeks ago, people were saying stay away from him because it looked like Brian Robinson, a third-round rookie, might start. Of course, he had his injury. He was actually a victim of a shooting. Kudos to him for being okay. Obviously, with him out, you would think Gibson's probably the de facto starter. But obviously, you still got J.M. McKissick there who's going to catch a lot of passes. So I don't think Gibson's going to catch a ton of passes this year, especially with now they have, with Terry McLaurin. You draft Jahan Dotson. You could tie in Logan Thomas healthy. And Brian Robinson actually could be back by week 5. So I would say with him, I think he's going to lose a lot of touches this year. And now we're into the much later round guys. At this point, these guys are going to be on your bench, but I do think Tony Pollard's a guy you should take a flyer on because of how much he catches. He can catch the ball. And just a note on Alexander Madison: if you draft Dalvin Cook, make sure you get Madison because Cook has trouble staying healthy, and whenever Madison steps in for him, he goes off. That's my notes on the running backs. As for the wide receivers, very deep pool of receivers this year. For guys at the top, Cooper Kupp, will he do that like he did last year again? I don't know if that's even possible, but I think him being the number 1 receiver in fantasy football is more than justified. We'll still have a huge year. I think Justin Jefferson is, pretty much a lock to be a top 3 receiver in fantasy this year because he's a guy who's already a beast, and now the Vikings are going to be throwing the ball even more. He's going to get even more targets than he already does. How good he is, should have a big year. Devontae Adams, I know he goes from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr, but Derek Carr is not a scrub. I think he's very decent, and they went to college together, and they were a dynamic duo in college. Devontae had 131 catches for over 1,800 yards and 24 touchdowns his last year at Fresno State with Derek Carr. So, not worried about that. People are saying, will he have enough reps? Yes, he will. Whether or not it's via the running back or receiver position, he somehow will get the ball. I look at it like this: if they use him less as a running back, that means he'll get more reception, which is probably almost even better. If he still gets periodic carry, they still use him as another running back. I still think he's because he's how dominant he is. He'll still pick up at least 75, 80 yards on the ground. He'll still pick up a couple of receiving yards here and there. Good chance he'll find the end zone. He just gets you. He just gets yards, gets you points. The 49ers are very good at getting him the ball in just any way they can. Not worried about him. The questions about his usage. CeeDee Lamb, I think, could be a top 3 guy at the receiver position this year. If Amari Cooper not there, Cedric Wilson not there, Mike Gallup might miss the first couple of weeks. They have a number 1 receiver. He's a stud. Jack's going to look for him a lot. I think he'll be a beast. There's one guy on this list who I think is really, really good. But for fantasy football purposes, I have a lot of questions about. And that man is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's a great player. Last year he had well over 100 catches, had over 1,100 yards. He had like 9 or 10 touchdowns, something like that. He's probably the fastest guy in the league. Probably a top 5 receiver in the game. Over the last few years, he's been at least a top 7 rate receiver in fantasy football. But now going from Patrick Mahomes to Tua, it's a monstrous quarterback drop off. Tua has not shown the ability to push the ball down the field. I just don't know if he'll fit for that offense with Tua there, because Tua has not shown the ability to throw the ball down the field with any sort of success or consistency or confidence at all. Could he take a step forward? Yes, that's probably the biggest mystery in the NFL. So right now he's ranked as the wide receiver number 8, probably going in the second round. I would stay away from Tyreek Hill this year. One guy I really like is T. Higgins. Right now he's ranked as wide receiver 10. I think could end up in the top 5. He's a guy, even with Ja'Marr Chase and all those weapons there, he still had over 1,100 yards last year. And he's probably gonna have some one-on-one coverage because they're gonna worry about Ja'Marr Chase and the run game. So I'm very excited about him. Definitely target him. Talking about DJ Moore, I think he has another big year. I mean, last year he had a great year, and he had a combination of Sam Darnold and Cam Newton as his quarterbacks. And Baker Mayfield, who I'm not a fan of, I don't think is all that great, is definitely at least better than those two guys. So, although his quarterback play still isn't fantastic, the guy who still was putting up big numbers with a lot worse quarterback. So, he should definitely be a guy you target. Michael Pittman's a guy who had over 1,000 yards last year. He was good. I think continue to be even better because Matt Ryan is a lot better, and Carson Wentz just can't push the ball down the field. Matt Ryan's got a very good deep ball. Pittman's is a big play threat. I think that aligns really well. The receiver, it's all about can the quarterback get them the ball. Just looking at some receivers who have some quarterback issues. One of them's AJ Brown. I think you still take AJ Brown. I think Jalen Hurts could take a step forward. So I still think he has a great year. Deontay Johnson is a guy who's really good. He's kind of like AJ Brown. Like you can use him over the middle on those short throws a lot. So even if whether it's Mr. Trubisky, whether it's Kenny Pickett. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger really wasn't all that great last year. I'm not bashing him. He was at the end of his career, and Johnson still had an incredible season. So wide receiver 16, I think Deontay Johnson's fine. Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 19, and I mean, he was very good last year with Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills. And also, he actually was really good with Davis Mills. So I think now with Davis Mills, the full-time starter, I think Brandon Cooks is fine. And DK Metcalf, I would stay away. His ADP is a little high for a guy who has Geno Smith as his quarterback. He's a guy who's a big play threat, and Geno's got no arm, so I'll probably stay away from him. The guy I think is a sleeper is Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's like 5 or 6 games this year. He was a monster. He's their number one receiver, especially with Jameson Williams. Their talented rookie. Probably not going to be there to at least week 5, if not week 7 or 8. So I think he's a guy who could be really good. Marquise Brown. First of all, he'll be the number one option with DeAndre Hopkins out the first 6 weeks. He's a big play threat, and Kyler Murray loves to throw a deep ball. He's really good at it. I think he has a big year, even better than he did last year in Baltimore, and he had over 1,100 yards in Baltimore last year. I think he'd be the later round guys. Based on DeAndre Hopkins' ADP, he's only wide receiver 44. Still take him if you can get him on your bench, and you think the way your team is built, you can wait till week 7. Do it. He'll be a top 3 receiver once he comes back. I don't have any doubt that will be the case. And I think you should take a flyer on Elijah Moore. He's a guy where you're drafting him, probably going to be coming off your bench. If he's healthy, I think could have a huge year. I think it's one of the biggest sleepers in fantasy football this year. Some thoughts on the receivers, going to the tight ends. Once you do that, I'm going to briefly glance over the kickers and defense. Like I said, you should probably stream those. But I'll briefly glance over those, and then we'll wrap up. That's for the tight ends. Like I said, there's a couple of elite ones for sure. Those guys are certainly Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews are definitely the cream of the crop of that. Kelce is, I would say is the best tight end in the NFL. Fantasy football wise is interchangeable at 1 and 2 with Mark Andrews. Now he's been number one piece in that offense. He's tight end number 2. Mark Andrews, who's the number one option in the Baltimore offense. They do run the ball a lot, but they ran the ball a ton last year, and he still had a huge year last year. Taking him. Well, Kyle Pitts right now, ESPN has ranked as tight end number 3. Ledger had over 1,000 yards, but didn't really get into the end zone very, very much. Marcus Mariota is lighting the world on fire. Has been a starter in 3 years in the NFL, but also he does like tight ends. Delaney Walker was a fantasy football monster when Mariota was in Tennessee. I think he'll look for Pitts a lot. There's not a lot of other guys there. Drake London's still a rookie, battling some injuries, so I think Pitts will find the end zone a little bit more this year. Definitely should be a top 5 option. Kittle, I know he gets hurt sometimes, but when healthy, he shouldn't be a beast. And now they got Trey Lance, who's more of a big play threat than Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that helps Kittle. Should still be a top guy. Darren Waller's a great player. There's a bunch of guys I like: Dalton Schultz, Hockenson, Goddard, and Zach Ertz. Like the top 9 tight ends, you can go wrong with. Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Darren Waller, Dalton Schultz, T.J. Hockenson, and Dallas Goedert, and Zach Ertz because Ertz' connection with Kyler. I really like that. Guy could be a sleeper. I want you guys to keep an eye on I might mispronounce his name, but Everett Okwebunam in Denver. Now will be to start with Noah Fant being traded to Seattle in the Russell Wilson trade. They have a lot of weapons there, but I think could be a solid guy. If you miss out on the top tight ends, Dawson Knox too. So there's a lot of good tight ends this year. Before I wrap up, let's take a look at your kickers and your defense. Like I said, it should be your last 2 picks. Obviously, when it comes to kickers, they don't get better than Justin Tucker. And McPherson, the guy who obviously he kicked well as a rookie. He's extremely accurate. Of course, we saw what he did in the playoffs. Now that offense is going to score a lot. He's as safe as it gets. Matt Gay, the Rams are going to score well off one. Harrison Butker, I think, is still a great pick. He's probably the second best kicker in the NFL besides Tucker. He's got one of the strongest legs in the league. And if they're still going to score a ton of points, Daniel Carlson is a guy who now could be a really good option this year because of the Raiders' offense. Brandon McManus, he kicks in Denver. Now Denver's got a real offense. Even Tyler Bass in Buffalo's got a really good offense. Matt Prater in Arizona. Prater's older, but he's still got a really good leg. Arizona's going to score a lot. Ryan Succop, Tampa Bay will still score a lot. So here's what I don't like. I'm just not convinced of the New England offense. Nick Folk isn't the best. He's also much older. That being said, some of these kickers play until they're like 47 years old. So Dustin Hopkins could be a sleeper. They got the Chargers. Chargers are going to score a lot. I would probably steer away from Graham Gano, who's only kicker number 17, just because I'm not sure about the Giants' offense with Daniel Jones as their quarterback and the new coach. So, though he's very good, I don't think the Giants are going to score that many points. As for the defenses, your defense probably should be your last pick. Probably should be going, the 16th round. But let's take a look at them. The ones I like. I like the Bills. I think they're really good. The one area that they struggled in last year was pass rush, and they definitely improved that. At times, the run defense was shaky, but they got some young guys up front that I like. I think they should be better in that area. Tampa Bay Bucks, who were already really dominant against the run last year, were probably even better against the run. Signing Akeem Hicks. Saints are still a really good defense. I think the Packers added a lot to their defense. You lose Zadarius Smith, but you draft 2 guys, Deontay Wyatt on the interior, and you draft Quick Walker in the middle of that defense. 49ers still have a great defense. They'll force turnovers and get sacked. But what you want in your defense, you want them to be able to sack the quarterback and force turnovers. 49ers can do that. So that's what I would do. For defense I don't like. Not sure for the New England Patriots, who were fantastic last year, but losing J.C. Jackson, I don't think they'll be able to force as many turnovers. And I don't love their passers outside of Matt Judon, so maybe they're not the greatest option. All right, that's all I got. That's my fantasy football preview. I wish everyone luck in the fantasy football season. Make sure you draft your team. Until next time, so long, and have a great day.